Welcome to NACD BoardVision, where leading boardroom advisors, governance professionals, and seasoned directors discuss critical issues related to your responsibilities in the boardroom.
Welcome to NACD's BoardVision. I'm Peter Gleason, Managing Director of the National Association of Corporate Directors. I'm joined today by Catherine Bromlow, a partner in PwC's Center for Board Governance. Welcome, Catherine.
Thanks, Peter. It's my pleasure to be here.
Today's topic is board composition, how the board structures itself, balances its membership, skills, qualifications, diversity, and the list goes on. Catherine, what's the bottom line on the composition of the board?
Peter, given that the board meets in person only 8 or 9 times a year, on average, and really meets only for a day or so, the directors really need to work well together and bring all the needed skills and experience to the table in order to allow the board to oversee the company effectively.
We see things the same way. Last year, NACD produced a white paper on board composition that outlined a 3-step process. First, analyze the current board for its strengths and weaknesses. It's imperative that the board align the skills of its members with the company's strategy. Second, recruit members based on that analysis. Here it's important to go beyond the who do you know stage and cast a wide net to find appropriate candidates. This may involve search firms or director databases like NACD's Directors Registry. Finally, the third step is for the board to continually evaluate itself to identify areas for improvement. To steal a phrase from Procter & Gamble, lather, rinse, and repeat. This cycle never really ends, and the board needs to be constantly aware of the changing needs of the company.
And Peter, that type of pretty thoughtful process can easily take a year or more. And in particular, it takes time for both the company and the candidate to perform their respective due diligence processes.
Catherine, identifying candidates is a critical step. Can you share some insights?
Well, Peter, there are probably some things to think about. First is that active executives are in great demand, and many boards would like to have sitting CEOs as directors, but that can be actually pretty difficult. Many companies place limits on outside directorships for their CEOs. So by default, if you want to get an active executive, your board will probably have to look to other active executives, people like chief operating officers or divisional presidents. Second, sometimes boards need to seek out specific expertise, either in your industry or in a function like finance, marketing, or IT. And that kind of very specific expertise could lead your nominating committee to look for leaders in relevant professional associations. And finally, there just almost tends to be a bit of a bias to look for directors who are already serving on other boards. And it's interesting, in PwC's annual Corporate Directors Survey back in 2009, we asked a very similar question, and 49% of directors said that their boards were pretty reluctant to add a new director who didn't have any previous board experience. We tend to think that that is just a way that boards make sure that someone who's going to be coming in and joining their board really understands how boards work and how they need to interact with their fellow directors.
That makes it tough for those experienced executives who haven't found their first board seat yet. Last year, the SEC implemented additional required disclosures around director qualifications. These required companies to provide the public with more information about not only who is on the board, but what skills they bring to the table and what experiences are relevant to the company, really aiming at the why these directors are here. They also required companies to describe how diversity was discussed by the board. Interestingly, the SEC didn't really define diversity, but left that up to the boards to define. So we got some pretty interesting results in the first year of disclosures, but it's important to recognize the many different ways a diverse board can help a company. And that diversity can be around a variety of factors: experience, skills, race, gender, ethnicity, business background, or even age. All play a critical role in board composition and need to be considered as boards seek new directors.
And of course, all of those elements are in addition to the basic attributes you look for in every director, things like integrity, skepticism, independence, and courage.
It seems that it's not especially simple to find the right directors.
You're right, Peter. And that's why boards, and particularly nominating committees, really need to be strategic when they're looking at board composition. They should do things like look ahead to find out if there are some upcoming director retirements, or also consider whether there are changes coming in your corporate strategy or any other issues that could necessitate a different mix of members on your board.
One final thing boards may want to consider is the concept of staffing up. Most boards have an allowable size range that's specified in their board guidelines. For example, between 8 and 15 directors, and the company may currently have only 12 on the board. To your point, Catherine, as you look out a few years at pending retirements or other changes, it might be beneficial to take advantage of those extra board seats to bring on a few new members now, so there's some overlap with the more experienced directors on the board. Then as the retirements occur, the board can go back to its normal 12 people. Catherine, as we move to close this episode, let me point to a few tools that NACD has developed to help in this process. First, there's NACD's Blue Ribbon Commission Report on Director Professionalism, which outlines the roles and responsibilities of directors. We also released a white paper on board composition that I referred to earlier, which includes the board skills matrix, which helps align board member skills with the company strategy. It also has a sample disclosure template to help companies describe the composition of their board in the proxy statement. Finally, we have Directors Registry, a searchable director database with over 4,000 director candidates. Searches are based on the desired skills and experience, and the vast majority, approximately 98% of the candidates, also have prior board experience. So this can be a great resource for boards looking for new directors. And on that note, let's close out this session. Catherine, as always, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Peter. Thank you.
On behalf of NACD and PwC, I'm Peter Gleason, and thanks for joining us.